Hello tarot lovers and welcome to my channel. If you're new here and you want to connect with your deck, then you've come to the right place because this is where you can listen to your intuition, build your spiritual confidence and learn to read your tarot cards with ease. And today we are going to be talking about the Death card. Now, the Death card in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is not really about death. It's about transition. And what that means is it's about transition. It's about moving from one space to another in your life, whether it is being born, being part of a family, getting a job, having a relationship, having children. It might be growing old, becoming a grandparent, and of course, death is also included as our final transition. So, why am I talking about the Rider-Waite-Smith? Because it is basically our teaching deck that a lot of tarot teachers across the world use, and that's because it is the most famous tarot deck. Some people might argue with me about that, but it is the most famous tarot deck, and it is also an extremely good summary of all of the tarot decks that have gone before. And I will be talking about that more and more on my channel when I teach you the history of the tarot and we start to understand a lot more about how the tarot evolved into what it is today. So if you like my work, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notifications bell. And I am going to spin the camera around and we are going to take a deep dive into the meaning, but most importantly, the symbolism of number 13, the Death card. See you soon. Okay, so the card we are looking at today is the Death card. I like to use a large deck. I'll show you what that deck looks like. What if I put it back on the shelf? Goodness me, being tidy. A large deck. This is the giant deck, and I like this deck mainly because you can see more detail in the card because it's bigger, and it saves me having to enlarge it on the using the computer, and also because it's just handy, I think, to have the larger deck. If you don't have to, you can use a smaller deck, but just for comparison, you can see the difference in the card size, and for videoing and that sort of thing, it's nice to have a large deck. This is the small deck. I recommend this deck for anyone, the one in the yellow box like this, for anyone that's starting off reading the tarot, because the colors are the original colors that Pamela Colman Smith intended with the deck. It helps you if you're learning that traditional symbolism that you want to take forward with you in your tarot journey, to have this particular deck. And then you can move on and you can look at some of the more creative decks. There is I'll show you the Universal Waite, for example. If you have a look at this one, that's got the most amazing colors, most beautiful deck. Really, really pretty, as you can see. But to start with, I think it's good to have just the basic colors. And look, the colors are pretty boring because when they first released the deck back in the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot back in 1909, they didn't have great printing. And a lot of the beautiful colours that Pamela Colman Smith used, they just couldn't reproduce them in the printing. So it sort of limits what we can see. But at the same time, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it makes it easier for us to actually learn those basic colours. So, death. Back in the day, death meant death. And if we look at my colour symbolism cheat sheets, and these are available in my Etsy shop. For those of you who've been following along in this series, I gave you a big rundown on these sheets. There's this sheet here that gives all the deeper symbolism detail. And then, of course, you've got the colour and other symbolism on the backs, a spot for notes. This is my abbreviated cheat sheet that you can use. And, of course, it has dot grid on the back. And I've got a worksheet as well that you can use to help you look at the symbolism and turn it into your own understanding of the card. So they're available in my shop, and I will make sure there is a link both in the description box and hopefully, if I remember, down in the comments as well for you, to make it easier for you to find them if you want to go and buy these sheets and follow along with me in the videos. And of course, when you purchase my cheat sheets, you support the work that I do. It means that it's possible for me to continue doing all my free trainings. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notifications bell so that you never miss another one of my uploads. So the original meaning of death was death. And then as the cards were used more, the meaning of the card became more sophisticated. And so if we look at the Golden Dawn title, the child of the great transformers. And so this is a card about transformation. The numerology of this card is 4. So this is card number 13. So we add 1 and 3 together to create a reduction, which is 4. And we go all the way around to numerology number 4, which is reliability and stability. And if we think about the other major arcana card that is number 4, I need to find it. This one, the Emperor, this is also a card about reliability and stability, but each card has a slightly different interpretation of that meaning. So with the Emperor, for example, you're talking about someone who leads to create reliability and stability. But if you look at the Death card, it's a very different interpretation of the reliability and the stability of life. We know ultimately we will be born. We know ultimately we will pass away or we will die. We know that we will have a very different interpretation of how we confront each transformation in our life. And so if you look here, you've got the nobleman. His life is transformed and he's keeled over. So, you know, if I think in my life, I've not really had any great, for example, financial catastrophe. But if I think about when I was counselling and I used to see couples where there'd be these entrepreneurs who would earn an enormous amount of money and fly high, and then all of a sudden everything would go wrong and their entire world would go wrong, and their partner who had married them or formed a relationship with them on the preface that they had millions and suddenly they didn't, you know, it becomes a really interesting test for whether the relationship can move forward, whether in fact the person who's had this happen to them keels over and basically implodes, or whether they dust themselves up, pick themselves up and keep going. You've got the young girl who turns away from death. It's too much for her. She can't look at it. It's too confronting. The child who looks death in the face in the space of innocence, because they don't know what death is. So when something comes along that challenges them or confronts them, they roll with it. They go with it. And then the priest, of course, who looks death in the face, but in a different way, in terms of being the conduit that creates the transformation for the world. So that's Number 4 is about stability. It's about the fact that we know in our life we're going to have challenges. We know in our life we're going to be born, we're going to go through the transition into adulthood, we're either going to have a relationship or not. We might buy a house, we might have children, we're going to grow old. There's the whole transition into perhaps being a patriarch of a family in some way. And then, of course, there's growing old, and then there's passing away. So we know that we're on this journey, and each stage represents something different for us. So if we look at the timing of this card, the timing and how the Golden Dawn timing is worked out, and I haven't got my sheet here with me, but in previous videos I've shown it. The Golden Dawn placed the tarot cards onto the astrological wheel, and so that's how we get the dates for all the cards. If you're wondering why I refer back to the Golden Dawn, it's because Pamela Coleman Smith and Arthur Waite were members of the Golden Dawn, and the card is written around the Golden Dawn structures for the tarot. So the Golden Dawn was an organization that did a lot for mysticism and understanding magic. And so we tend to, many of their writings have influenced mysticism today. So the dates we have is October 21 to November 20, which is Scorpio. And when we think about Scorpio as an element, it's the element of water. So it's emotion and the unconscious. So thinking about going into that unconscious space, the spiritual space, the transition space. If we think about the zodiac of Scorpio, it's described as like a psychic passion and powerful emotion. If you think about Scorpio as an astrological sign, this is a person who goes along even keel, equilibrium, but if something happens that creates a shift to that equilibrium, just like a scorpion, they might turn around and you might get a little bit of a reaction from that person. So we're talking about someone who can shift and change at a moment's notice. And that's exactly what transition can be like in your life. You can be going along, and I know in my life, something sudden happens and suddenly life gets turned absolutely upside down. So understanding that Scorpio, when I first looked, I thought, how does Scorpio relate to this card? And that's your connection, that shift, that change, that transition. And of course, Scorpio can also, it's generally represented as the scorpion. That's generally the symbol. But it can also be represented as a bird of prey, or the phoenix, which is a bird that dies and, bursts into flames and dies and is reborn out of the ashes, just as the death card represents our transition from our physical form into our spiritual form. If we look at the Hebrew letter that goes with this card, we're looking at the letter Nun, which is the fish. So this is the 13th key or the 13th pathway. As you can see, we're card number 13 and we go from beauty to victory. So this idea of our existence being in this plane of being this beautiful representation of life. And that's not necessarily that we are physically beautiful or even emotionally beautiful, but that there's this beauty in the fact that we are there. And then our culmination or our completion or our transition is a sense of victory. The fish is actually a symbol of spirituality, and it represents being in the moment. So the fish is swimming around and it's twisting and it's turning and it's moving and it's in the moment. It indicates that just as water is all around the fish, spirit is all around us and within us. And it indicates that we have this soul within us that never ever dies. It's able to move and change and transform with the currents of life, or the water, or the emotional space, or the spirit that's around us. So the Hebrew letters is also part of the Golden Dawn and part of the Kabbalah, which is all linked to the Tree of Life to give greater meaning to the tarot. But what I've done here is I've given you just the correspondence on the Tree of Life of the Death card. And we will take a deeper dive into the Kabbalah as time goes on. And I probably will refer you back to these videos to understand each one of the Hebrew letters and how that they are attributed to the major arcana. So classical element is water. So we're looking at emotion, the emotion of transition. And this is a card about moving from one space to another. So if we look at the symbolism on the card, we've got grey sky. Grey sky is representing the transformation of death. It's about that mysticism, the confusion, and maybe even often the depression we feel about death. But then if you look here, you've got the beautiful halo around the sun behind the gates to heaven, which sit right at the back of the card, showing that there is a beautiful place that we're going to go to. There is hope and there is transition that happens as a result of moving from our physical form to our spiritual form. The Black Rider, of course, represents death and invites us to think about our transition. The flag has a white harvest crown on it. The 5 ears of corn form a pentagram, and the symbol of the 5-pointed star encased in which is a symbol of a 5-pointed star encased in a circle. The upward point of the star represents the element of earth, air, fire, and water. All the things that contribute to life and which make up and are part of all of us and create our transition from the physical world into the spiritual world. I talked about the fallen rich man or king, the bishop, the girl, and the child. The boat on the river is symbolic of carrying our souls from death along the river of life to their transformation. And of course, the river is blue, representing the river of life, the twists and turns of life, and the emotion. Water is also our unconscious, and all of the things that happen in life that cause us to be in that space. It's not just about death. When you see the death card in a reading, it's not just about, oh, well, you're transitioning towards the end of your life. It's about what is coming up next for this person. And of course, you would read based on the cards around the death card to help you understand what that person perhaps might need to be preparing for. The black and the white symbolism. Now, black is feminine, white is masculine. So all through the card, there is this black and white symbolism, which is creating this balance. It's creating this balance of the energy. So you've got feminine energy, which is this soft energy that is about spiritualism, slowing down, taking your time, reflecting, and the white energy or the masculine energy, which is about taking action and being and driving forward and making things happen. So it's about creating that balance in your life. The yellow symbolism, of course, is an emphasis on search for meaning, brightness, vitality. If we think about Icarus and his flight up into the sky to discover, the world, see the world, and then he flew too high and he fell. So this idea of the wonderful possibilities that are there for you, the meaning, the brightness, the warmth, the welcoming place that you're transitioning to next. And so, of course, when you look at the card, it's focused on the priest here because he's transitioning to the afterworld, and his glow, the glow of this aura, of this light, of this happiness and expectation and possibility is being reflected onto death, to say, death is awful, it's painful, it's especially for those around the person that it's happening to. But there's also this hope and happiness that person is moving to the next stage, that there is that process, that whilst there is pain, there is also the next stage that's available to you. Thinking about this card in terms of not just physical death, but all of the transitions that happen for us throughout our lives. So I hope that gives you a deeper understanding of the card. I'm sure there's even more in there if I delved in even deeper. The next card we are going to look at is Temperance, which is a card of balance. So let's have a look at that card next. Don't forget that if you do want my notes, a lot of people love my notes that I use to describe the card. You can have all of my notes. They're available in my shop. I will put a link to those into the description box. And of course, the large and small deck that I recommend for you. And anything, of course, that you purchase supports my little channel. Take care, everybody, and I will see you in the next video where we'll talk about the Temperance card. Take care. Bye-bye.